What is up, my friends, and welcome into an emergency podcast here. Tyler Dooley, Jamie Lynch, as we didn't think we'd be doing this today, but the Phillies have some breaking news. The MLB has some breaking news, and welcome into this emergency podcast brought to you by our friends over at Art of Words. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, one Philly artist is proving it with local sports content, incredible content. Can't promote our friends over at Art of Words enough. Tyler Dooley, Jamie Lynch, Jose Alvarado.
I actually golfed with them this morning.
Did you?
Yeah.
That's pretty
so anyway,
cool.
we'll get to the news at hand.
Yeah, so I did an ad read the one time, and I was like, this has been hanging in my mom's house for
I have two right over there.
Incredible work. But what's up, everybody? Welcome into this emergency podcast. Jose Alvarado has been suspended by Major League Baseball for 80 games for testing positive for a performance-enhancing drug. Now, the report is that it was part of a weight loss program that Alvarado was trying to be on. During the off season, he did
slim down. He has
commented multiple times about his weight and had looked, significantly slimmer in the off season and was pumping. Obviously, always throws hard, but felt like he was throwing a little extra hard because maybe he was in a little bit better shape. But he has been suspended 80 games. And Jamie, I think the more important pressing thing about this may not be the 80 games. Which sucks in and of itself because this bullpen was kind of on thin ice already. But the fact that he's barred from the postseason, which, obviously the Phillies are on pace to be a playoff team, whether it's a wild card team or catch the Mets and win the division, they're on pace to be a playoff team. For a bullpen that was pretty darn thin to begin with, this really hurts this team.
Yeah, this is a devastating blow. There's no cookie cutting this one. This sucks. I'm kind of ticked off right now at Jose or whoever didn't get this approved because through the players union, they have a website you can upload the product to and it basically spits out if it's legal or not for you. So for somebody not to kind of fact check this along the way, I don't think he's Mark McGuire in the locker room juicing up, but this is something avoidable. So I'm kind of ticked off, frankly, that, their best bullpen piece, their most reliable piece, did this. And I was at the game last night with the family and I just broke the news to my wife at the school carnival. And I was like, how Alvarado suspended 80 games. She was like, man, what? I was like, yeah, but even worse, he can't pitch in the postseason. So I think you're entirely right. You can survive that 80 game regular season suspension. The postseason is a death shot. And now you have to upgrade. You have to.
It's funny because on Friday, I feel like I'm the death knell for news that's about to break or things that go poorly, because over the last 2 weeks I propped up Tanner Banks. He since then has had two kind of bunker outings, and then
he was looking good there for a bit though.
And then on Friday I talked about how Jordan Romano has been much better as of late, and the one that my parting words of the segment were maybe Jordan Romano allows the Phillies to just go get one high leverage instead of two.
Oh, Tyler,
they were going to get one. But that was my parting words were Romano in place, and maybe not as an entire closer, maybe as the de facto closer. We know Rob Thomson does high leverage, but you think about it with Romano pitching well and Strom and Alvarado, if Kerkering finds, consistency throughout the season, that's your four. If you could add one more guy, that's a serviceable five. Your two lefties are legit, and then Romano and Kerkering and whomever you bring in from the right side would have felt pretty comfortable. 48 hours later, now we're back to they probably need two.
Yeah, I would say so. Convenient you left the Joe Ross hive out of your bullpen run down there.
I mean, listen, he's been good.
I'm kidding. No, but you're absolutely right. You were going to need one without your best piece. Now you don't have your best piece. And, this is where Caleb Cotham is going to have to possibly turn some garbage into gold, right? Because both of these moves aren't going to be – there's probably going to be one swing for the fence-ish kind of move for your upper caliber bullpen arms, hopefully sooner rather than later. And then you're probably going to make a lower level veteran journeyman try to salvage something, maybe a guy you've been scouting for a while that can be had for the cheap that you feel like you can develop. I do feel great about Caleb Cotham and Dave Dombrowski and them and what they're looking for. They have a type. They're going to know who that guy is, but you're going to have to go make that first move pretty quick. The more substantial move, as they say, Tyler, it's, takes two to tango. You're going to have to wait for that arm
Sure.
probably a little longer to become available.
Yeah, and you saw it last year. We did a trade deadline show last year where we talked about, will the Phillies make a huge splash? And then we watched as relievers got traded for a lot, right? Tanner Scott went for a ton. Lucas Erceg went for a ton. And Carlos Estevez, cost the Phillies 2 pretty solid prospects in return. And the reason is
we were kind of surprised at Alvarado, at the time. We were like, whoa, they moved Alvarado. All right.
You can never have enough bullpen depth, especially if you're a winning team, right? The Royals went and got Erceg because they needed a high leverage reliever. He's been excellent since acquiring him. Now, the reason he cost as much as he did, and I believe Mason Barnett is the A's number 3 overall prospect now. It's one of the big pieces that the Royals gave up. He's got a 0.4 ERA this year. He's been excellent this year too, right? We talked about Estevez, wasn't nearly as sharp as that, but you needed another, and I think the Phillies were looking for a guy who could serve as the team's closer instead of going by committee. And you got a half a season out of him, and he ends up moving on, maybe on his fruition, maybe on Dave Dombrowski's fruition. But relievers cost a lot these days, especially for teams that are in contention, and for relievers that have multiple years of control, whether it be via their free agent contract or arbitration. Relievers cost a lot these days.
And, knowing this Phillies front office, they're, look, they might be forced into taking an expiring contract, looming free agent on, but they preferably like those multi-years of control left. So, we'll get a little bit better of an idea of who that market is. But I would imagine one of these next moves, you're going to have to force another team to trade with you pretty soon, because you're just straight up going to need arms. I mean, hopefully Mick Abel goes out there today. And let's get some thumbs up here in the chat for Mick Abel's debut today. But maybe he can throw himself for a couple of weeks here into an intriguing prospect. But Tyler, my first thought when I heard all this news and I was kind of digesting it was, oh, bye, Aiden Miller. Like, Jose's selfishness, or whatever you want to call it, not going through the proper channels to get this suspension. My first thought was, you just sent a death shot to the Phillies farm system. Like, you're going to have to move on from anybody other than Andrew Painter right now because of how much investment, right? Like, John Middleton's all in with his spending. This is his cap. This is the team's core. There's some expiring contracts. You can't let this size magnitude of a season go to waste. So you're going to be forced into dealing an Aiden Miller, a Justin Crawford. I'm sure Painter they'll protect, in the corner with a sword. But everybody else is probably on the trading block now. So Jose Alvarado, by default, really just killed your farm system.
Well, and I think the other thing, too, that plays into this is, and I know it's only May 18th. We have, two plus months until the deadline. Teams are going to fall out of contention. But with the extra wild card teams now, you have
it takes longer.
You have 6 playoff teams in each league. 12.
They're in a tight spot here.
12 out of 30 teams make the playoffs, and it's not just 12 teams that go, okay, we know we're making the playoffs. It's, of course, it's your Dodgers, it's your Padres, it's the Tigers, who are playing crazy good baseball right now. Maybe the Twins, who are never going to lose a baseball game again. But there are the upper echelon teams, and then there's the dreck, if you will, right? The Rockies and those type of teams. But all those teams that are clumped in the middle, playing about 500 ball, a game or two above, a game or two below, they're going to feel like they're still in contention until July. So they're
basically 80%. Just a quick perusing here of the standings. Basically 80% of each division is within like that 500 mark.
Yeah. It's
that just means you have to overpay.
It becomes even
if you want to get something done early.
Right. When you had 4 teams, 3 divisions, and a wild card, you could see teams that were hovering at 500 in July and go, they're not a playoff team.
Yeah.
There's just, and now you've got teams that are hovering at 500. Think about last year. The Tigers were below 500 or right at 500 at the trade deadline. Went on a crazy run, ended up going to the postseason, right? The Royals last year won 30 more games than they did the year prior. It was like one of the largest win total chains.
The Diamondbacks the year that took out the Phils. Same thing.
And then the ultimate one is,
I'm sorry for the cough. I got like I think a piece of pollen landed directly in my throat right before we sat down to do this.
You think about the ultimate one, right? The 2007 Rockies. I mean, that was a team that they just decided we were never losing again and made a run to the World Series. So, like, there are teams now that are hovering at about 500. And as you said, it's a huge number of teams still because we're only 45 games into the season that are at 500, a game or two below, a game or two above, right? I think about the Cardinals. The Cardinals are a team that won 9 straight games to put themselves right back to the above 500 mark. They looked like they were toast a couple of weeks ago. And that's why you say it's a long season. It's 162 games. So the only teams right now that are, going to be marketable sellers, do they have anything in their bullpens that you want? We've just watched 2 games of the Pirates bullpen be crap. Like, it's not as bad. It's not as bad as it's been, but it's not very good either. Is there anybody in that bullpen you want? Anybody in the Nationals bullpen you want? Anybody in the Rockies bullpen that you want? Right? Like, these teams.
Yeah, you're going to have to the Orioles. Who would have thought the Orioles are this bad? But they probably don't have a lot.
That might be a team, right? I saw a tweet. I forget who it might have been. I think it was from our buddy Kevin Cooney from the Fanatic, who was talking about maybe Felix Bautista. And, coming off the injury, it was a substantial injury to him, but you're going to overpay for anybody at this point.
Yeah, and this is why I jokingly threw out Spencer Turnbull a couple of weeks back when he was working out for teams. I was like, just bring him in. You have the relationship with I swear to God, like there's like a piece of like hay fever or something like on my throat. I'm dying here. But he has a relationship with Cotham. He wants that 1-year cheap prove-it deal. Like you need depth in the bullpen before this. And now it's absolutely devastating to the Phils. This is up there with like pretty, outside of like, one of the main cornerstone pillars of the team going out. This is a substantial blow to their chances this year.
Yeah, I think in terms of importance to their positional group, like you're talking Zach Wheeler, you're talking Bryce Harper, right? Like that, you're talking Kyle Schwarber.
And Schwarber, if he went down, I'd be like, they're toast. Yeah.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, in terms of their importance to their group, Jose Alvarado is the most important reliever to this team, whether he's the closer or he's the setup guy or he's
high leverage. Yeah.
He's their high leverage guy, right? He's the guy that, again, like his numbers were off the charts good this year. 2.7 ERA, 25 strikeouts in 20 innings, a 1-2 whip. The walks were way down, just a 4%, just under 5% walk rate. 30% strikeout rate. Velocity was up. Cutter looked great. He had a couple of outings where it was like those typical high wire acts with Jose Alvarado, but he's been pretty consistent as you could possibly get from a guy to start the year.
Yeah, I'm ticked off. I'm for right or wrong, because Jose had become like a fan favorite, right? The friendship bracelets, the awesome moment with the kid in the stands this year, right. Coffee is life. Like, loved everything about Jose. Vibes were immaculate, off the chart. He was like a lovable, he made jokes about how fat he was. And now it's like I have this real sour taste in my mouth. Right or wrong, this is completely avoidable. And it really derailed the direction of this season in a massive way.
All right, so last thing before we get out of here, game starts at about 1:35. Mick Abel gets the ball today. Let's go, Mick. Let's get some thumbs up for Mick here. I really wish that's what we were talking about, was Mick Abel making his debut. But instead, here we are. Last thing, we've talked about this plenty. I've done it with John. I've done it with you. I've done it on the show. At this point, internally, you have a couple of guys who could make sense. And they have stated for months now that Andrew Painter is a starter and a starter only. Griff has started. Griff McGarry has.
You bringing Griff up?
And then the last guy is the guy they've moved to the bullpen is Seth Johnson. Who they acquired in the Gregory Soto and Sir Anthony Dominguez trade.
Might as well.
I think maybe Johnson is the guy that you would give a shot to. I mean, good stuff.
He got a shot at the end of last year in the pen there for a little bit. Quick cup of coffee. So, yeah, I would imagine he's probably up here ASAP. I see Pat Ryan in the chat throw out Halsey's name in St. Louis. Unfortunately, St. Louis is playing pretty good ball.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everybody that's gotten brought up so far, like Helsley, Mason Miller has been on the conversation piece for a year and a half now, because the perception is that the A's are a poorly run organization, and the reality is they're actually playing some pretty good baseball right now, despite the fact that they haven't spent a whole lot of money. Pete Fairbanks, you and I have talked about him for a year now. But like, again, all of these guys are going to cost you at least an arm, if not an arm and a bat.
Matthew Ryan says David Robertson's a free agent.
Name I've heard a lot over the year.
I mean, if it's only going to cost you money, like I'll try anybody at this point. Like their back is against the wall. This put them in a corner. So like if somebody's only going to cost you money, yeah, bring them in. Sure. If you don't have to lose anything, why not?
It was funny too, because I remember talking about when the Braves traded for Rafael Montero. It was like, wow, it was a really early season trade. These types of trades just really don't materialize at this point of the season, where you have a guy who in the past has been like a 2.7, 2.8 ERA guy, and they needed a reliever. Now the Phillies find themselves in that same spot where they're in. And the thing is, I don't think they can just look for a lefty. As much as they would love a lefty, to have a second lefty in the bullpen of high leverage, because they do still have Tanner Banks, of course. But I think that they're just going to have to go get unarmed.
Yeah, they are. And Vince Pellegrini, super chat, he says, is it true Jose is not eligible for the playoffs? Yes, it is true. And unfortunately, the worst part of all of this, because like we talked about at the top, Tyler, you could survive 80 games. You could patchwork that together, maybe get a young arm that gets hot for 2 or 3 weeks and gives you a stretch, and like you bring somebody in closer to the deadline. You could survive that. The playoffs is like, you really need that piece you make to be a high leverage, dependable arm. And like you said, those are expensive.
Well, good news is Raphael in the chat says, I'll step in. High end pitch is 56, but I have heart.
Get the arm elbow grease out there. Yeah.
Get the arm loose. You're starting today. I think that this becomes a pressing need, because it was a pressing need prior at the deadline, right? Like maybe
this became a desperate need. Yeah. And desperation, Tyler, as they say, it's a stinky MF in cologne.
So we'll see what happens. Jamie, appreciate you. Mick Abel gets the ball in about 16 minutes. Really excited to see what the kids got. It is a spot start.
Who doesn't want to make their first career start versus Paul Skeens? And
by the way, we have to talk about Skeens for just a second, if you don't mind. Sure. I've now seen people saying maybe the best plan for the Pittsburgh Pirates is to trade Paul Skeens, and it's like,
no,
you're a dumpster fire organization.
Then just give up being a franchise. Give up being a franchise. You have no interest in competing.
I ripped them yesterday or Friday, because to me, they're one of the organizations that are a stain on baseball. Them, the A's for a while were this way.
Yeah.
Who else did I throw under the bus? The Marlins.
Sure.
These teams that just have no interest in spending money. Like, you have to. I understand there's rich teams, there's poor teams, there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's us, as was said in the movie Moneyball. But like, you have to show an interest in winning. And when you're doing the constant flip of, we have these incredible prospects and we're going to move them before they hit, their arbitration years to get more prospects and just play this cycle the drain game, you're never going to be able to compete. And I think the number is, since 2000, only one team outside of the top 20 in monetary spending has won a World Series, and it was the 2003 Marlins. I mean, I'm not saying you have to spend Dodgers money. I'm not saying you have to spend Mets money or Phillies money.
Spend some money.
You have to spend some money. So we'll be interested to see. We'll be interested to see what the Phillies' move is. I don't know if this necessarily means that the Phillies are going to move a high-end prospect. I don't know if this necessarily means the Phillies are going to move a Ranger Suarez.
I fear this means bye-bye Aiden Miller.
I would love to say they're going to be able to protect Aiden Miller still. I think that their farm system's better than it's been in years. But what does that mean? What does that mean? It's 16, 17 as opposed to 22, 24, 26.
Not my sweet boy, Aiden. Please protect him.
We'll see what happens. Jamie Lynch, appreciate you joining us today. Again, just as we get out of here, for those that are just joining us, Jose Alvarado has been suspended for 80 games for performance-enhancing drug use. Will be suspended 80 games. And as Jamie mentioned, the more pressing thing is that he is ineligible for the postseason now. So big thank you to everybody in the chat for joining us today.
Set that thumbs up before you get out of here, huh? A little thumbs up there. A little thumbs up now.
Here we got 15 minutes until we see Abel and Skeens take the mound. Again, this podcast was brought to you by our friends at Art of Words. They say a picture's worth 1,000 words, and Art of Words proves it with incredible Philly sports memorabilia and art. So big thanks to Jamie Lynch. We'll be back tomorrow to break this news down a little bit further. We'll talk about the series, whether it's a sweep or the Phillies winning 2 of 3, Mick Abel's start versus Paul Skeens, and all of that and much more right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. So enjoy the game. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 1 o'clock right here on the PHLY Phillies podcast. See you.
Damn it, Jose.
We all silly like the mayor.